You're listening to Big World Network.
Pathological Passion, written by Jared and Lisa Kwan, read by Wendy Herman. Episode 9. Elise waited a while after Eric left the room before she made her exit. She found her thoughts wandering as she walked down the hall. She let her hand glide along the wall as she walked towards the elevators. As she got closer, she could hear the gentle waves crash on the artificial beach. This usually calming sound had no effect on her. Instead, she could feel her chest tighten. This could really be it. Everything I've worked for, gone, Elise thought to herself. And because of what? A project some engineer messed up that got out of control? There must be some way I can survive this besides just getting a date. Elise was so wrapped up in her thinking that she didn't respond to anyone who greeted her. She entered the elevator and pressed the button. While the doors lingered open, she watched the artificial sunset, and for a moment enjoyed the cool breeze as it brushed against her face. As the doors closed, she felt a cold chill down her spine. This is just a procedural item. They won't fire me over this. No one was injured, she thought. Why am I being so hard on myself? She turned to look out the glass wall of the elevator and began to think back on the small cabin in Vermont where she had last seen her father, shortly before he passed away. Elise could still imagine the variety of colors in the trees and the amazing smell of autumn. She could still picture her father dressed in business casual polo and khaki pants, which she was certain he had imitated from an L.L. Bean catalog. It was sad that she could barely remember him at the height of his career, and instead pictured only the shell of the great and powerful Norman Mayweather. I once was the most sought-after CEO in the world, he had said as he sat on the cabin porch. I have been in almost every country in the world, met presidents, emperors, warlords, and kings. Did I ever tell you about the time I had dinner with the Prince of Wales? I was there for that dinner, Elise had replied distractedly as she glanced down at her tablet. There was always more work to be done. I have so many regrets, he said uncharacteristically. So many. Dad, are you feeling all right? She asked. Yes, it's just that I have had time to think about things, and I have made so many bad decisions, Norman replied. My career has been, let's say, artificially inflated. What are you talking about? Elise asked with a look of concern. Someday you will be faced with problems, and you will have a series of choices in front of you. You should know that taking responsibility is respected, but often punished. Deflection is accepted, but while denial or passing the blame will get you out of hot water, it will always burn you in the end. I know how the world works, she replied. I used to think that I knew how it worked. When I left GE to run the mess at Apple, he said, I just need you to promise me that you will find a good man and escape this life. You have more than enough money. You have a chance to do things right. Dad, you know that I'm like you. It isn't about the money. At least, it's not all about the money. I want to make a difference in this world, and this is the only way I know how. If you work hard and end up like me, but with no kids, who are you making the difference in the world for? He asked. Just because I'm not rushing to have 5 kids doesn't mean I'm not going to have any, Elise answered. I'm not sure what brought this on, but don't worry about it. Everything will work out. He let out a laugh. We shall see. The voice of the receptionist on her floor startled her from her reflection as she stepped from the elevator. Mr. Veers is waiting for you in your office, she said. Chairman Veers? Elise asked. Yes, ma'am, the young woman replied. Elise straightened up and walked into her office. As promised, the chairman was there. Jim, she said as she extended her hand, it is good to see you. I thought you were in Seattle. I was in Seattle, Jim replied. I wish I were here under better circumstances. What do you mean? I have had reports of people getting infected by a chemical being developed by your department. Then I heard about the medical screenings, and now the cover-up, Jim replied. Is any of this true? I can explain, she started to say, but Jim raised his hands. Why haven't I heard anything from you? He asked. I didn't know how extensive things were until just recently, Elise said. Okay, then I need to know right now. What are we looking at, and who is responsible? The chemical was in development as a training tool, Elise began. I have been advised that it is not deadly or contagious. We have identified the infected people and they are under observation. I'm still looking into exactly what happened on this. I have it from a reliable source that decisions you made concerning this issue may not have been in the company's best interest, Jim said. What? Elise asked. But that is not true. Look, I don't necessarily believe the accusation. However, we have to be cautious with the information we have been provided. So we are going to put you on temporary suspension with pay while we investigate this. With all due respect, Jim, I'm not sure where you're getting your information, but I am sincere when I say that I have made all the right decisions on this from the moment I discovered the issue. Everything will be taken under consideration. However, as per your own direct orders, you need to report for observation with all the others that have been infected, Jim replied. Very well. As she turned back to the door, she noticed that there were a couple of security guards standing outside. She let out a sigh as she exited the office. Ma'am, we need to escort you, a guard began to say. Yes, I know. Let's get this over with. Okay, you're all set, Sandra said as she stood up. Elise let out a sigh as she glanced down at her tracking bracelet. Thanks. Before I go, I want to let you know that no matter what happens, you are a great boss, Sandra added. I appreciate it. Elise watched as Sandra exited the interrogation room. She took a deep breath and rested her head on her arm as she looked at the mirror on the wall. She was the last person under quarantine who needed to use this room, so she blinked for a few moments and let herself drift off. She found herself standing on the porch of her family cabin, but instead of dense forest in front, an amazing beach with pure white sand and clear blue water dressed the surroundings. On the beach, a single person lay on a chair, staring out at the ocean. Elise walked out onto the beach, knowing full well that it was Eric. Let me guess, you fell asleep on the artificial beach? She asked as she put her hand up to shield her eyes from the sun. Eric sat up and looked around. Then let me guess, you were dreaming of girls' camp? Listen, there are more important things going on out in the real world, and I may not have a job soon, Elise said in a serious tone. What does that mean for our agreement? I mean, this isn't exactly what I imagined for our date. I'll hold up my end of the bargain, but after that, I don't want to see or hear from you again. Do you understand? Elise replied. And no, this isn't the date. We'll set something up. Well, doesn't that sound like it'll be magical? Eric muttered, but he noticed that Elise had already started to walk away from him. Then she looked over her shoulder and yelled, I would watch out for those rogue waves. What? Eric asked in a loud shout. He turned back to the ocean to see a massive wave heading toward him.
You're listening to Big World Network.
Music by Kevin MacLeod.